that you belong to one of the groups. But the first group is the unchanging. In other words, there are people who don't change despite the experience. When you started working at the university, there are things you did. They actually don't work. But 30 years working, I worked for sure for around 30 years, you are still behaving in the same way. Little agreeing that the truth is, you are in this group, the unchanging group, where experience, good or bad, does not advise your current and future. Sometimes I give talks to schools, and another time talking to a parents association in a school. You ask them a question. When you are young, did your parents beat you? Rather than, the word is not discipline, but beat. You know, some parents beat others. Discipline. You know, it depends on which one was yours. You know, I grew up during the days of Kenyan emergency, 1950s. And when your parents wanted to beat you, they didn't prepare. There was no belt. Just get and of course they were in a fireplace. Just get a piece of firewood, and by the time you are leaving, your clothes are full of fire. And it's your mother or your father who has actually, that's not discipline, it is beating. So the next question, did that help you? Do you think you became a better person because of the wounds you can claim your parents gave you? The answer is, oh no, parents are in agreement. It doesn't work, it didn't help. I was still doing other things, only making sure my parents don't know about it. Third question, do you beat your children? And they all go, oh yes, oh yes. What does that tell you about the parents? They know it doesn't help, yet they are doing it on their parents. It means they're in the first category. And as a group, that's the thing you need to ask yourself. Are there things WWFK has done over the last 20, 30 years? And if truth be told, it actually doesn't give a lot of benefits to life. I used to be a trustee in our pension fund, and there is, especially for us locals, there is a lot of commitment to investing. I'm sure the chairman knows this subject better than me. Investing in real estate. And I still remember as a trustee with our advisors coming, and they said your percentage of investment for the pension fund in the real estate is more than required. You know, that's where money is saved. It took them the next trustee board meeting to demonstrate to me the return on investment from the real estate, like our pension fund owned COBP House, which is now the deputy president's office. When you work backwards to the return on investment for the last 15 years, compared with what other streams were, it was bad. But you still feel, but surely. Now, I hope you are getting what I'm driving at. It's possible for management and board to actually continue things the same way, ceteris paribus, all things are constant, the same way, even when evidence is suggesting it is not helping with the vision of the organization. The next group of people are what we call the reactive. Normally we use the term reactive in a negative way. So reactive. But now having told you about number one, you can see reactive people are very good people. At least don't be in the first group. Second group are people who learn from experience. If he does something that doesn't work, he never does it again. If he does something at the work, he questions it. Why did it actually work? And then learns why it worked. And he is able now to repeat it in a better way into the future. We call them reactive because they learn from experience. They normally say experience is a good teacher. What they forget to tell you is experience is a very expensive teacher. It's a good teacher, but expensive. You have an accident, you learn how to drive slowly. You know, still remember driving over 40 years ago, driving the car Shell had just bought me. And I'm going to 150, 160. I just want to the feel of a young person. You only need one accident to learn. The speed control is not for the police. It's for your own safety. But it requires. But you see, by the time you're in hospital bed with the legs hung up, experience is a teacher. But it's a very expensive teacher. So we need to understand that a lot of us, that's where we are. Even as a board or management, we learn from experience. But it's a very expensive teacher. So succession planning fits into that area, where people don't wait to learn. Before going to any project, They do a dry run. They ask themselves, in 10 years, how will life be? What are likely to happen? What do you want to achieve in 10 years? Question number 2. What are likely barriers that can stop us going there? Question number 3. And what are likely possible aids that can help us reach there? Then you actually work out how it can be done. That means instead of waiting for experience to teach you, you have already seen the problem and the possibility of it happening and work out. Number 1, how to avoid the barrier, either go over it or under it or through it. Number 2, in case, like they say in aviation, the worst case scenario, you are ready for what happens. For example, you take a loan, a family loan. It's foolish if you are really proactive to take that loan and not deal with the issue of what about if I'm unable to pay. My first job was in development banking, and it was just 45 years ago, but I still remember old men coming where we were selling their property, just telling me, young man, I never intended not to pay, but when I took the loan, I did this and this and this. Of course, some bought another one, but I did this and this and this, and then here I am. Now, when I took the loan, it was $500,000, and 45 years ago, that was a lot of money. But now, you people asking me for $3 million. I only took $500,000. Now, the explanation I learned early, just before I got married, that it's important to be proactive. Look at the possibility you'll be unable to pay. Then ask yourself, if I'm unable to pay, is this a risk I'm willing to take? That's what it means to be a proactive person. You never get into something before you fully calculate what can go wrong and prepare to stop it going wrong, or if it goes wrong, you can live with it. That's really where succession planning comes in. That's what we are really talking about. And that's what I've just been talking about. And I would have, if I had the time, I wanted to spend a lot of time, plus I would have given you opportunity to discuss the possible future of WF. I would have wanted to hear, because we are the ones who know, what are likely barriers to that future. And I would have wanted to say, how can successful plan help deal with each of these barriers? Unfortunately, we don't have the time, but at least have a thought about it. And even as you are in the board, in the meeting, I'm sure there are things about the future you talked about, but you need to go below the second point to find out what are the barriers that can stop you, and then what are you likely to do that could actually stop the barrier. Being from petroleum industry, safety is a big issue. And you must always ask yourself, what is the likelihood of an accident happening? And of course, in the petroleum industry, it's normally huge, and huge losses. So the most importantly, proactively is, how can I stop it? But then sometimes you have to assume, in the worst case scenario, it might happen. Do you prepare an ERS, emergency response plan? In other words, after the accident, how can you reduce the impact of the accident? Of course, you have tried your best to stop it. But in case it happens, like for example, one of the things we did in Shell was to try to do the best to train our drivers not to cause accidents. But in the case of an accident, we went on the Mombasa Road right up to Maraba, because we are delivering fuel to Uganda, picking out hospitals where you have an agreement with the hospital on, if a Shell driver was brought here, don't ask him for money, deal with him, and with a signed document, we'll pay. And you know the difference between the time the guy dying is that waiting to be told whether he can be admitted or not. Maybe the decision is that the guy leaves. And yet the truth is, maybe there will be nobody, whoever needs that hospital may never get somebody in the next 10 years. But the fact that you have prepared it means you can actually reduce the impact. That has already happened, but the impact, what can happen? It may determine whether the guy dies or not. I'm using my experience in your area. Maybe you think about what are we talking about, and what does it actually mean? And I'll put a timer so that I can follow my time. I would have wanted us to talk about business continuity, which a bit more.
I suppose we can actually pause there and just discuss.
Or in other words, even if there's no time to discuss,
yes,
in groups. I wanted to put you in groups, but now we can allow it a big group.
Exactly. Yes, yes.
Good.
Suggest that
okay.
That issue about the future of the DWF and what are the barriers? That point there, because I think it's actually a very critical issue, and it's something out of the conversation we were having today within the board, and some work which has been done for us by Mary Lou. We just thought that we can pause there to just hear both from management and from the board what they see as particularly barrier to the future of the WWF Kenya and what we can do, because I'm sure there must be something which management can contribute in that area. We as the board are thinking ourselves in terms of what some of those things could be. It would be good to hear from the management, apart from the management, who benefited from the discussion of this meeting.
This is not for my ears, it's for yours. So you're not answering any question from me, you're just discussing among yourselves. But it's good to share. And you can comment on any one of the three, I think.
I think if nobody wants to start, then I can put words in management's mouth. For me, one of the big ones is around funding. And from the perspective that as an organization which is Kenya-based, we are very reliant on funding from our partner offices, which is very, very specific project linkages. And the thing which causes me to lose sleep or sleep uncomfortably is if one of the national offices or the partners from other parts of the world decide that they are no longer supporting the project in Kenya and are probably supporting the project in another country. I see that as something very critical.
A possible barrier to your future.
Yes, yes. So far, it's been fine. Everything has worked. We've been here as an organization for close to 60 years. We've been a national office for the last 6 years. Yes, yeah. But that risk always exists. And the people who execute the mandate of the organization and the management. And so suppose I wonder, does it give them a similar sleepless nights? Yeah.
Over to management. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. It touches on, of course, the function of fundraising partnerships and all of us here as management. And what we would say is that if there is one thing that we have identified as a risk to the continuity of WWF Kenya, it is the fact that most of our funding, as we know, is restricted. It is project money. And the fact that we also belong to a network that has shown us a lot of love, in quotes. Since we became a national organization, we have been trying to build internal capacity to be able to explore other opportunities, and I'm hoping the next session, which we are presenting, is really asking ourselves and putting to the board some of the things that we have done. So it's not like I want to dilute that, but it keeps us awake. That is one thing that keeps us awake as management, because when we evaluate where the unrestricted funding is coming from, we are trying to ensure that we build a critical mass of Kenyans who start to give. We are trying to ensure that we get corporates on board. Most of their money is, I would say 80% is restricted and 20% is not restricted. So how do we invest that money better? Is there a giving culture? We have asked ourselves a lot of questions, and in the next presentation we will really be sharing some of the things that we think have worked, those that have not worked, and where we think we want to go with it.
Okay.
I don't know whether, Chair, that is an enough explanation.
It's a conversation, not directed at me.
Okay, that's okay.
At least you are answering that.
Yes.
Possible future is WWF to continue realizing its vision 20 years from now.
Yes.
Possible barrier is pulling the carpet from below your legs and you can't stand again. The third one is the whole process of how do you handle it. According to you, you have already approached Kenyan corporates, you have approached individuals, and some are working, some others are not working, and you'll be presenting further this. Have I summarized correctly?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. But let's hear from somebody else. Yes.
Maybe just to go back to previous slides around unchanging, reactive, and proactive. I think for me, the possible barrier is because of the transitions that we have managed from being a country office to being a national office. We have been very, I think, more reactive than proactive. So things have almost been business as usual. And the possible future, I see that we are now, we have always realized it, but we have never maybe operationalized it. We are working in Kenya. So we need to contextualize the programmatic work we're doing to address the priorities in Kenya. Yes, we are affiliated to the network. So rather than be driven by the donor preferences, we drive the agenda. We say in Kenya, these are the areas we need to address, conservation related, and then plug into funding that will allow us to deal with problems in Kenya for Kenyans. So contextualizing WWF in Kenya for Kenya, I think for me is a future that I'd like to see us going into.
And dealing with the issue the chairman mentioned, it will make it easier for Kenyan to donate to projects you have contextualized, because they understand what the money is needed for. Is that what you are saying?
Yes.
Okay. I think we are really dealing with, you wanted to say something, Madam Saidi.
Oh, yeah, about the likely barriers to the future. One thing that springs to mind, looking back to previous years, is that we have a global brand, and the reputational risk can also cause some real damage. So just thinking back to the Salvo rhinos and activism, increased activism around environmental issues, which may or may not be relevant or whatever, and the increased activism that also happens on social media, and how to prepare for that kind of. And I think I've seen this there is preparedness, but I don't know if it's adequate.
So the vision clear, barrier, the possibility that some activist somewhere could bring up a story to bring WWF Kenya down. Solution on the third one is, are you having somebody with their fingers on the social media and who will act quickly enough before the flood? So that, because once it becomes a flood, it's very difficult to undo it. But do you have social media expertise that can keep in touch and react and know how to react on time? I think that's what you are saying. Okay. But you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thank you. Thinking around, it's part of the work that we do in WWF, in essence, is to supplement what otherwise should have been done by the national governments. If national governments had their capacities and investments and things like that, then we would not have a space of operation. So one of the things I was thinking about is, in terms of barriers, is would that capacity government ever happen? I think the answer is no, because when I look at several other WWF offices all over the world, including in rich economies like Europe, we still have WWF offices doing something to supplement their national governments. So that's one thing. But on the flip side of that is the fact that we do have competitors. The conservation space is not just WWF in it. There are many others who are there. So the risk involved in that is for someone else becoming better than us in this space. So I see that as a possible barrier. So we have to always be very competitive.
So these local donations you expected from Madame would disappear when people think you are not the best investment.
And the relevance as well. You know,
You are not
relevance
relevant.
in the space.
So money will not come.
Yeah,
and
money
soon
and
enough.
also respect, and we actually think that we should be the go-to place
Yeah.
for conservation in Kenya. That's what we want. So can someone else ever take that space for us? Are we in that space already or not? I think we need to think about
Yeah.
that.
And you are so related with what Saidi is saying, reputational risk. But the US is emphasizing performance. In other words, you simply are not up to it. Nothing to do with because your media. Simply, you're not doing a good job. And somebody else is doing even better. So you end up in problem. That's the risk.
If that happens, yeah.
If that
I
happens.
think we are doing
And we are not suggesting it's
but
happening.
the others there, we don't know how they're
But the idea behind being proactive is that you are not acting because there is a problem. You are acting because there might be a problem. Because if you wait until it comes, you will not have the time to do it. So you must imagine it, assess how the level of risk, how likely is it. The ones that are not too likely, you first of all don't do it. The ones with high possibilities, you must have a proper paper designing exactly what the barrier is, exactly what you can do about it, and right up into the ERS, emergency response plan, in case it ever happens. So again, you are saying we need to spend more time on it before you come to a conclusion that we have a problem, or we are likely to have a problem. Who else wanted to say something? Yes, sir.
Yes, continue where Richard finished, because what we know about the future is that it is uncertain. It is certain that it is uncertain.
Yeah.
To put it in those terms, which means that we can't now say simply this is going to happen in 5 years' time. Our strategic plan will look like that, etc. And as Richard says, even in our NGO world, it's a competitive world. Because it's uncertain, because new things happen with climate change and biodiversity and what have you. There were new actors coming in, maybe younger people in a newly formed whatever, Fridays for Future or whatever, and we may end up being less relevant, or to the worst, being irrelevant more or less, unless we know what is going to happen, to put our ears to the ground and do horizon scanning, for example, so that we are prepared when the changes come. And I think that's one of the risks that we're running in this country and many other countries also. But we can handle that if we know and try to predict what's happening, and be prepared and be agile. And we're not all, we're an old, well-respected organization, but that doesn't mean that we're always that agile as new organizations are. So I think we have to listen to what is needed from such an organization to be able to move and say, okay, last year we had this priority in our strategic plan, but things have changed over the year. We need to refocus on whatever it is. Things like that. But
Okay.
That's mainly on the risk side, but it's also how can we do that? We need to do horizon scanning. We need to use it, and we have to listen carefully and be prepared. And say, we have to finish this first before we do anything else. We have to be much more agile.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, the neighbor.
WWF Kenya to be a household name in terms of our brand awareness and familiarity, and then this speaks to the movement building, to have a movement of people who can actually protect, and talk about WWF and say, these people, the way people are aligned to political parties, it's the way people should be able to align to our brand. And on the second question, what are the likely barriers to the future, then it's the unrestricted funding, especially to be able to conduct not only innovative but impactful communications for fundraising products and activities. At the moment, we rely mainly on majorly on organic, like in terms of if it's we don't buy media as much, but we just use our organic contacts if it's the budgets, it's very much communications budget is aligned to the program work. So we are not able, to detour and do something, outside the box. But we have to align to the project in most cases.
Okay. Let me ask a question. You don't have to answer it. When did you last review your model and assessing the risks that you face? I wanted to go to this subject, but we are not going to go to it. Business continuity model. When did you last review it? 1 year ago, 2 years ago? Because it changes, and that's the point he's making, and I think you also made the same point. If you wrote it 5 years ago, it will not be very relevant now. Do you have a business continuity model? When did you last review it? Because that's the subject we are discussing. Yeah, because business continuity model means it's a brainstorming thing. Yeah, what are the possible things that could bring the thing down? For example, if a hacker was able to get to the WWF Kenya and hack it, how quickly can you recover? What amount of damage would it be? Isn't that a possible? Or you think they are not clever enough hackers in Kenya? But now the trouble is hackers can operate from Russia and hack in Kenya. Am I right? Yeah. So those are the things that appear in business modeling. You have had it. Yeah, and they normally say if something has happened somewhere else, it's a level 1 risk. It could actually happen in yours, isn't it? Have you thought about it? What about if all of you? I know we had a red herring in 2000. I was supplies manager then for Shell for East Africa, and we were told come when 1999 ends, January 2000, all computers will crash. Young people here can't believe that nonsense. But we believed it. We spent so much time in our initial modeling about what you can do, and I ended up at the end of the year with too much stock of supplies. And the trouble is that even then, a crude cargo was something like almost 1 billion Kenya shillings, which is, even for Shell, was a huge number. But we finally had to bring crude, just in case the computers close. Shell will still have fuel in Kenya, only to be an anticlimax. Not only did something happen, nothing happened. Now, but we had learned about modeling and things. So I'm not suggesting I don't have experience of many things you prepare that actually don't happen. But certainly you can't say you are proactive without a business continuity model. It's better, whether it is good enough or not good enough, it must be there, and it must be reviewed regularly so that you can see where the issues are. But Madame is the one who was dealing with that issue.
But there is a risk also here, because sometimes I was already old in 2000 when we in my country also thought that the world would go under, and
the whole world,
to be able to sleep that night, and I could sleep. But anyway, if we too focused on avoiding or on identifying risks, we may be too focused on avoiding the risks, which means that we are not focused enough on being proactive.
Agreed.
So you have to.
But in a business model, remember what I said earlier?
Yeah.
You arrive at all the risks, then you rate them. Yeah. And all risk rating is low, just ignore them. So there's no risk. If you follow the process of modeling, it will make you throw away all unlikely things to happen. So that you don't spend your time, instead of building the business, you are busy in defense. You can't score by defense. You must have we are in football. Your point is made. Your point is made. Yeah, but he was talking.
Sorry, man.
Yeah, what I would say is that definitely we need to continuously review our business model, and we started, of course, by developing a 10-year strategic plan. the space is quite dynamic. We need to be able to review whether our goals still hold, and really that is the reason for bringing in a consultant who has helped us quite a bit to understand and really get help from us where we are, so that as we continue to visit our business model, we are looking at, we have a unit that runs our audit risk and compliance, and every unit has a model on our risks. What are our risks as a unit, as a department? What are you dealing with? What are those that you can resolve now? What are the mitigation measures that we are putting in place? But really, we need to get better at it. We cannot say we have done everything we need to do. We can continue to visit and
Okay. Can somebody help turn this discussion to succession planning as a tool for business continuity? Is there any one of the barriers that has been mentioned whose best solution, the many solutions, can be helped by succession planning?
Well, maybe we can talk about it from the perspective of communication and fundraising. And if the youth is considered to be a factor, not only as a contributor but also as a major stakeholder in conservation in the future, then it's important to not only bring in people who are the youth, but also ensure that your organization understands the youth and how they want to communicate.
Generation, what is it being called? Is it Z?
New millennials.
No, there's a newer one. I'm being told millennials are now too old. Yeah. So whatever they are, I think the point you are making is, if you really are thinking long term, one barrier is the possibility that you disappear with the vision. The young people don't get it. When we were in school, at least my wife was a very active wildlife. It was called Wildlife Club. And she reminds me that the school brought her to Aboseli. So she always remembers as a small high school girl. And so from then onwards, we cannot fail to go as a family to a national park because a school teacher somewhere put the idea in my wife. That's a way to spend money. But I just want to tell you it works in my house. that those things you put in a small child are likely to carry through to the end. I think the point is made. And that's really, when you are thinking only of current, that kind of thought will not come. And so you are not likely to think it is good use of money to have wildlife clubs in high school funded, or trips funded, or something, or supported, or people willing, WWF willingness to talk, to go to schools and talk to them, or whatever. I don't know. I don't have the details. I'm not in education. But I think that needs to be dealt with. Who else wanted to say something? Yes?
Maybe just to try and connect business continuity to succession planning. I would pick it from a scenario where sometimes organizational existence and success depend on relationships, and the relationships is relationships between the people within the organization's leadership, and leadership could either be the board, the management, or any other person within the organization. And of course, these people might actually be able to leave the organization or anything else happens. And by the end of that relationship, then how would it act on the continuity of that particular organization's performance and the existence? So really, if you look at continuity, how is it possible for the organization, WWF, to lose Don as a particular person who drives it?
It's called talent.
The talent, or whichever. It could be talent or the ability to pull in resources to the organization, or to pull in that really what makes the organization be known as an organization, and the organization still continues having the same bit of zeal in terms of performance.
Agreed. And one of the things I was going to emphasize, we're going to have discussed, is the fact that if you are that critical, you are the fly that attracts all the honey, or whatever. You are the one who attracts all the honey. Then you are such a critical asset. However junior you are, we must ask ourselves, how do we retain you? And the likely event we don't retain you, who will replace you? without telling you that because we want you to feel nice. But we still know somebody, if in case you disappear, who can replace you. So the continuity is still there, even if you don't stay. Like, number one is to retain you, but we can't retain you in case you have been made the ambassador of Kenya in Japan. You are likely to go, even if you wanted to stay. So what do we do? That's what succession planning is all about. How do you retain? If the person has to go, and the only reason he goes is not just because the wife has become an ambassador in Japan, he could just cease living, die, or lack interest, or something. That's what our subject is today. You cannot assume, like when I joined in the 1970s, every company assumed you are going to stay in that company until you retire. I'm sure that's not the millennials and whatever the other people are being called are not in that class. And I know that because just before I retired, Shell used to have a scheme for us to help us with mortgage. And so we thought that's one of the most important staff motivation thing. The fact that if you stay in Shell, you are assured of those days the banks were not very good. They could not give you money without you putting 10%. And 10% would be too big for your salary. So Shell would only give you. Then I remember just before I retired, my staff coming to say, please, we don't want this thing. I said, are you serious? Said, yes. Who told you I want to stay in Shell forever? And you, because the rule was, they gave you the money. If you stayed 5 years, it was a gift. If you left earlier, you had all your part-time benefits went into clearing the loan. Said, so you're making a jail. I don't want a jail. Me, I thought my department, we went to management, discussed it, and they said it's a general understood thing. Young people don't want to stay. So they said, please convert it to salary. Said, if you convert it to salary and you assume you are saying that a years, it will become 500 shillings per month. Whereas you could have gotten 200,000 shillings if you got it. They said no. So it disappeared. Just before retired, it was removed. And it was not management, it was staff. And sure enough, many of those young people left. So I think that's the point you are making. We must look, how do we retain the people? But knowing the new generation, we must also assume, if they leave, how do you prepare a pipeline, talent pipeline, whatever the area of need, so that you don't go backwards. You stop and then start moving forwards again. That's really what our discussion is on today. And I realize my time is just about to end, but I think the discussion was, I wanted us to do an exercise by giving examples of people who have done planning well. I also wanted to talk about the IBM and succession planning, but because the notes are with Daisy, anybody interested can ask Daisy for the notes. But IBM is a good example of people who do succession planning. We can spend time talking about what succession planning, but what I've just said is what it is. It's a part of business continuity. It is a process of identifying the possible critical jobs. The first exercise is, what is critical? And critical does not go by seniority. It is the type of job that if somebody left without a notice, for about a month, there is confusion. So however junior that job is, it becomes a critical job. So succession planning is not just for the seniors. So the basis is not seniority. The basis is criticality of the job. So the first part is you must ask yourself, what are those critical jobs where you know very well if they are not there, there will be, of course, some will have a bigger impact than others. So the first thing is to rate them. The next thing is to give them rating. And the higher the rating, the more important it is for you to have a properly debated management and board approved succession plan for that particular job. Having identified those critical jobs are, the second part of it is to ask yourself, what kind of people do we need? Hoping, you are not asking what degrees do they have. You are asking what are the competencies? And they are different. Competencies are different from degrees. You can have a degree in engineering, but you don't have the competencies that are required for a particular critical job. So for each one of those critical jobs, you must list the competencies. What are the requirements? And maybe the best example I can give competencies, somebody at the reception. What degree can fit there? You first of all say, what competence do we require? What does the job require? That's when you realize one of the competencies required at the reception is smiling. Which university gives smiling as a course? And yet, if you put somebody there with a PhD, but is not able to smile, will the reception work? Because the idea behind the reception is to make people feel welcome, and if they came annoyed, by the time they reach the boss, they have settled. That's the responsibility of a young girl at the reception. So the competence is not a degree. It's the ability to smile. The other one is, and that's a more difficult one, the ability to hide her emotions. In the sense that she had just come to the office, the mother died last night, but because she wants to go to a funeral in Western Kenya in 2 weeks' time, in Western Kenya, it doesn't happen quickly. Now, so she knows it is wrong to be asking for leave now. So she's at the reception, and the mother died last night. But nobody should know among the clients that her mother has died. That's a very high competence. Very few of us can actually qualify to be receptionists. Because you see, if you become the person where the death of the mother is written on the face, it will affect business. Would you agree with me? Yeah. So if you think the receptionist is a critical job, then you must ask yourself, who are the people? If we lost this one, who are the people who have the ability to smile, ability to hide their emotions? And of course, that doesn't mean they will cry. They will cry later, but not before the customer. The other one is ability to control their anger. You go, I still remember, I used to be the show manager in Kisumu in the 1980s. Regional manager. I still remember there was let me not say which particular race the person was. I had a customer who was very difficult. Comes and insults the receptionist. The next time I appear, the person is crying. And within no time, we are taking the person to hospital because of ulcers. Now, you need to understand that if you are at the reception, people will insult you. They'll call you all kinds of things. How do you get to where you have a person with a competence that looks at the person and you say, you dog. You look at the person, you realize a dog normally has 4 legs, you ask her 2, and you understand this guy is blind. So it doesn't annoy you. That's a guy requiring sympathy. Now, I'm only giving this an example. That kind of a person. Now, go through every critical job. Look at the competencies. Because if somebody has those competencies, you can train him on the hard skills, and they are going to do the job well. That's what really we're talking about. So once you have identified what the critical jobs are, now you must ask for that. What competencies do those particular jobs require? You know, when I was in the university, I used to think that if you're not like talking to people, the best thing is to be a vet, because you see they only deal with the dogs and animals. Until now, later, I'm wiser. I understand no dog ever pays the bills. It's a human being. If you take your dog to a vet, who will pay the bill? A human being. So if you're a vet who doesn't know how to deal with customers, people will be going to the other vet clinic that is run by someone with 1 degree. You have 5 degrees and you're an expert, but you keep annoying people until your clinic closes. You can see that competence that deals with it. So you need to ask yourself, what are those? And that's the second thing that needs to be done. Once you have arrived at the competence, you now go through your people. Who are the criteria candidates? What are their competencies? Because if smiling, for a receptionist, require smiling level 4. But some of us have smiling level 2. So we might be candidates. But that means we have a gap of 2 levels. So you go through the people and find out none of us can ever do a job without a gap. All of us are human, we have gaps. But if that gap is known, These are the competence requirements. These are the competence the occupant has. So you have to see the gap. Number two, if that person was to leave, who are the second line who can do that job? What are their competencies? What are their difference? And then who is at level 3 in that line? If not for all jobs, only for the critical jobs. Once you have now seen the gaps that are involved, then your next exercise is to start identifying competency gap closure initiatives. What can be done? You know, the number of things HR says, yes, we take for training. But some of the competencies, no amount of training can close the gap. You need other things other than training to close the gap. And you know, you need to understand, like if it's smiling, maybe all you need is to get somebody to a more difficult area. And they see people smiling, and yet they have a rougher time. Until they realize, mine is not this level. And you now come and start smiling. Because they are thinking now, look, smaller. Now, I don't know what we need to debate. What are things that can close the gaps? Because you can't say you have a succession plan by identifying Kamau, Otieno are the ones going to take over. Have you assessed their competencies? Have you established the gaps? Once you know the gaps, what are the things you are currently doing to close the gap? So that by the time the other person leaves suddenly, you know that I have 4 people on the line. Are they most likely they not all leave at the same time? And that's really the critical thing we are talking about. You know, you have an initiative on how to close the thing, and then you have a document that can be taken to management for approval. So if each department has arrived at it, and you all come together, you have arrived. That's when you arrive at an understanding that some of those talents are not available in your organization. You don't have anybody whom you can train. And you start thinking, where can you poach? Chairman.
Because, I was saying, the focus in succession planning in all organizations always appears to be around people.
Yeah.
Which is a key area of focus. But I happen to think that that's only one aspect of succession planning. And for me, it has to go beyond people. And I was interested in the examples you gave there of organizations which are very good at succession planning. And one organization comes to mind which was excellent with succession planning, ran one of the best global businesses. But today we don't hear about at all. A company known as Kodak. And the lesson, I suppose, from that is the fact that we need to be good at succession planning in a holistic way, from a people perspective, but also from a business model perspective, so that we recognize the changes which are coming in, which could impact our business, do impact our people, and require that we change our business model and also change, obviously, manage the people in an appropriate manner. So,
like you can see, that was what I wanted us to discuss at a business continuity, but I skipped it. I skipped it in the sense that really the barriers are not about people. The barriers are maybe technology. You insist on a certain type of technology, and it will just bypass you. Like Kodak. I think that's a thing. The other thing, of course, is political continuity. If you can see the direction you are going is going to be a barrier to wildlife, you must ask yourself, when that guy who is looking like he's likely to win, wins, he thinks wildlife conservation is a Muzungu thing. You know what Muzungu is?
No.
Because you are a Muzungu. Now, you see that. So when you say Muzungu, they are saying this colonialism. How can we as Africans be still colonized in our mind? Now, so if somebody like that takes over, WWF is as good as finished. They will even proscribe you and say, those people should leave the country. All those are business continuity issues. And the chairman is saying we need to spend time on that. So if we had dealt with our exercise earlier, all this will come up because the barriers are different. And the solution for them is different. However, one thing that is certain, you have no succession plan if people are not involved.
That was a little bit my point, with it being relevant or irrelevant.
Yeah.
We don't want to be the Kodak
No.
of conservation.
Yeah, I agree.
And that is part of what we should be thinking.
Yeah, and that's why I think even if we don't do it today, that exercise still needs to be done. Yeah. So that, and on a serious note, with a whole day allocated to that, so that you have clarity on it. Now, unfortunately, according to my timer, I have only 6 minutes remaining, and I wanted us to have some kind of, and I have not really, you can see there are many things I wanted to cover. Yeah, I don't think we. So let's now open up to general discussion. What is it you wanted us to cover, even if it's a note and I have not covered it? You raise a question, I can make a comment, you can make a comment, doesn't have to be a question, that about the whole idea behind preparedness. And the assumption is the succession plan for individuals is only a small aspect. And I think I said this during the introduction. It's a wider thing is a business continuity model that will look at all possible areas that could affect your continuity. But anyway, let me allow you to talk. It can be a question, can be a comment. We are helping one another. I'm not a lecturer, I'm a facilitator.
I have a question related to that. Because
Go ahead.
Things get difficult if we are getting less relevant as an organization.
Yeah.
And we know that, we realize, and we know what we should be doing. And some of our people in the organization, we feel that they are not fit for purpose for the relocated or redirected organization. How do we handle that?
3 suggestions. Number 1, competency, open up the competency gap analysis to everybody. In other words, not just the critical jobs. That means people who are likely to qualify will be there. And then you are able to see that this person, given the vision of the organization, if you do competence, you will see many people who are maintaining ground. They are likely to ever be promoted, and even now their contribution currently has a problem. It's not enough to simply don't increase their salaries. You need to find an exit plan. Exit plan means you look at their skills, you realize their skills are not needed here, but they're needed somewhere. If you are able to help them get another job, it's even better. Because basically they are not stolen, if I'm understanding you correctly, they simply are square plugs in round holes. And they simply can't go in. And it is that competence gap analysis that will help you to know, you start thinking, if I move in from here, you look around and you realize they can't. So you start the exit plan. But it's such that you have to plan well, because obviously once he knows he's going, he could steal. Now, although he has never stolen. So you have to find a way of helping him out without getting animosity out of him. That's the first thing. The second thing that they deal with it, if you are having people that are not fitting into the purpose, is to admit there is likely to be another direction, because they are not fitting in this department, but they could fit somewhere else. Again, if you move in a hurry, and it happens the department you're taking them from is regarded as high level, high class, nothing happens. Now you have a problem with him moving. But then you can't leave him there, because if you do, it's the whole organization that will come down. And so you need to find a way of moving him. Not necessarily exit, but moving him to where he can be better prepared. And I think that's very important. The third thing is to also offer redundancy terms.
Okay. Yeah.
When you offer redundancy terms, it costs you money. But then people, and you stated very clearly, Cheryl, we did that. I worked for Shell for 30 years. We did BPR, business process engineering, which is the exercise you're talking about. We did it every 3 to 4 years. So I knew I didn't have a job every 3 or 4 years. Because basically you repeat the whole process, everybody loses their job, you create new ones, you create competitors, then you go to the basket to see who quits. Whoever is left inside the basket is given good terms to leave. So, and some of them are very happy to leave, because that's money extra they never planned for. Some of them start businesses and they do very well, so that they are not living with a bad heart. And because it's a system, everybody in Shell knew you are likely to stay longer depends on your competencies and the change things. And those are three things that very good. I hope I answered your question.
No, that was very good.
Yeah.
Maybe I can just add that,
Please.
it's interesting you tell us the story about Shell, which had already gotten it into the system.
Yeah.
So people coming into the organization already know that this is how it works. Maybe with new organizations, you can introduce some of these things, and they would catch on relatively quickly. But if you have an organization that has a long culture of not doing so, and and people who I guess perhaps entitled to some kind of loyalty and that kind of thing, then trying to isolate them and that kind of thing would really demotivate a large chunk of your business, bring into tremendous amount of risk. How would you then deal with that in an organization that is well entrenched in its bad habits?
I thought I enjoy consultancy. I still remember being invited by a university because after Matiang'i, if you are not a local, you will not understand Matiang'i. But Matiang'i came to where Alliance was getting 200 A's and they dropped down to 80. And so we started wondering whether the previous exams were reliable. End result, the university don't have enough C++. So private universities have a bigger problem. So they were asking, they say, now realize we are overstaffed. So what are we going to do? And they are in that category where for a long time, nobody lives, nobody is on fire. It's a religious university. So they don't believe in sharing of people. So Vice Chancellor said, we come and try to, he brought all the staff together, senior or junior, to talk about the rationale behind BPR, business process engineering. Unfortunately for me, because I've done it in Shell, I've had to face a lot of stuff to prepare them, and finally it happens. I was able to talk to them. And I told them we have an alternative. If we don't do BPR, it means the whole university will close down. All of you will lose your jobs. Since we have not reached that level, is it possible that if the organization can afford some money, and if it is done independently, clearly, professionally, and normally at that time you may need to outside person so that they are not dealing with who hated who, and professionally, and you are released on that basis and you are paid for it, then the smaller number have a chance of survival, and then the university will become bigger and you can call you back. By and large, some people are very offended with me, especially people who knew me. Don't you see the Vice Chancellor is misusing your consultancy? So I agree, it has its own challenges. But in the process, it will prepare the people, they did it slowly, and finally people left. And some of them called me, they ended up in other universities, and some others in other businesses. So it can be done, it should be done. The trouble is, if you fail to do it, you'll still do it anyway, because you just close down. And it's not academic, you just close down. Because if the costs are higher than, or the donations that are coming cannot support the people available, obviously, you are, and what happens is you start not paying your suppliers, supplier B, then you stop paying NSSF, then you don't pay NHIF, then you don't pay insurance, and soon enough you are being taken to court, and the whole thing is grounded. So I think the point he is raising is important, but we need a systematic way of doing it, professional way, and sometimes it's very difficult for the management itself to be itself the one that is to be regarded as independent. Because the critical thing is, if the people that remain serve, after that exercise, regard themselves very highly, they feel very proud, it means this company has lost 100 people, and I'm one left. If they don't think there is favoritism, and of course the big one in Kenya is tribalism, if they don't think so, they feel very proud and committed, those who remain. The ones who leave feel it was a fair game. A few people may still not fail, But that's at least my experience. That's how to deal with the matter. But however, why throw away people? Take good people from the beginning. Be careful about recruitment. Recruit with the future in mind. So when you are taking, like now, the CEO in Vivo, I still remember I had two candidates. I was looking at them. One was more experienced than the one who now finally became the CEO at Vivo, and I could see potential rather than currently this guy would do a better job. Potentially, this is why I going to go further. I actually gave this guy. The other guy, because he knew me, said, I know I didn't get the job, but I want to have a cup of tea, you tell me. Why did you pick me? I didn't know him, an explanation. But because he knew who knew whatever, I thought for my friendship to remain, let them agree to give the tea. And we sat down. It was one of the difficult meetings that caused you to sweat. Because he believed the other guy is not his age, he believes he is better, and the truth is that he is. But potentially, when you do potential, and you know potential, at least when we do it in Shell, we used to call it like a car. You can be two cars going to Nakuru. One is likely to reach there faster than the other. The three things you used to look when you're recruiting people, not the degree. If somebody has passed as engineering, he has it. What are you spending time on the engineer? So the university should have done a good job. You don't bother with the thinking and qualifying. You check three things. Number one, you check his capacity to analyze, capacity to think, capacity to problem solve. And he has nothing but the degree he did. If there are people who simply can't think, like one of the questions I used to give young people is, assume the president had your ear and made you Minister of Transport. What would change in transport? And you find a guy, first-class engineering, tells you about the road. He forgets that transport is not about road. There's aviation, there is water, it never comes up. You give him 15 minutes, he only talks about matatus. You can see his level of thinking has no helicopter, doesn't have the helicopter view. Another guy comes and tells you, before we talk about transport, let me just give you a definition of transport. Donkeys are used in places in Kenya. Okay, I didn't want it, but he is wide enough. And we have to think about what to do about that. We also use public means. Then we come to waters. Are there lakes in Kenya that where we can put water, or we can use water transport? And he goes on. He comes to aviation. How many other places do we need to open so that we can use it? Like now, yesterday, the deputy president opened Kakamega for flights. Now, that's a young man, but you can see where he is going. Now, if you start getting him, you are getting somebody with a high capacity. You can't see him ending up as CEO of Kenya. You see him going to the London office. And you can see it, just a young boy, just by when you talk to him. Instead of asking who is the minister of this or that. You know those are the questions we used to be asked in the 1970s. These days you can't be asked, they are removed every other day. But in our time, in the 1970s, a permanent secretary was actually permanent. So you had to remember. And you could fail your interview for not remembering the permanent secretary. Now those are not the questions you ask if you are recruiting people for the future. Number two, once you now can understand this guy has capacity, he can deal with any issues and he can think about it, helicopter view, go to details, he can think about it. You now ask yourself, but does the guy have self-motivation, self-drive? Because there are people who have high capacity, but the trouble with them, they give up very easily. I still remember being in a board, with a board, where we asked the CEO who has an MBA to try to get business with a certain organization. He drove at the gate, and the guy said, "Do you have an appointment?" No. So he was never allowed to see the CEO. And he waited for the next board meeting to tell the board, I could not go. Why? The watchman told me. Of course, you now can guess what happened to him. He was fired. Because obviously, his problem is a good man. But he doesn't have drive. In other words, when he sees a barrier, he finds a good report to the board. There's something some people have, and not all of us have it, where they never take on no for an answer. They always are thinking, if this stops, isn't there a way over or a way under? And some of the people that have drive do not have as high capacity. So don't be impressed by capacity, because capacity and not drive, you still not deliver. So you need to check, if you are thinking long term, think in terms of these guys we are dealing with. Do they have self-drive? And you ask him questions. Yes, what is the hardest thing you have ever dealt with? When you discover that he lost his girlfriend, that's the hardest thing he has ever dealt with. How you can't employ him? These are people who have not had any serious issue to deal with. Because you see, we are not talking about work. He has never worked. Don't ask him questions about that, about his life. And you discover there are people with resilience and self-drive. They do not require external motivation. They don't care whether the boss likes them or not. When they set out to do something, they will do it. Then thirdly, you must ask yourself, so I told you the acronym we use is CAR, capacity, and the second one is achievement drive, A for achievement, the third one is R for relationship. Even if you have the capacity, and even if you have the drive, if you don't know how to work with others, give up on the guy. Sometimes you have to just fail to employ a good guy, a guy with a drive. But if you employ him, he's a guy who will step on others on his way up and forget the saying. Remember me on your way up, you might need me on your way down. And they basically, these are people, and they are everywhere. Most companies, those are the guys who get promoted, but then they destroy the organization. They reach top management after everybody is looking for a way of, while they hear so and so has been promoted, all of them are resigning. They can't work with him. And there is no such a thing as a Lone Ranger. No business ever succeeded anywhere without it, including people who are scientists in laboratories. The lab must work in a team. Am I right? Whether you are whatever you're dealing with rats or whatever, there will be assistants. If you insult them, they might give you the wrong results. So you need to understand that if you really people who are going to stay long term, you must ask them about so you ask somebody, tell me something you have ever organized. And someone will tell you, I organized my sister's birthday. Okay, what were the challenges? And then you know, if you can organize your sister's birthday well, you can organize WWF well. The trouble is that we want him to organize animals. You have never given him a chance. Find out those skills, how are they available in his own life, up to date. But there are people who have never organized anything. Whenever they hear there is a voluntary thing, they run away. Remember, even when they come here, they will be looking how to avoid people, not how to be team players. Those are issues that are to do with, instead of looking at people removing them later, why don't you recruit correctly? People with a helicopter view are likely to be moved and still fit in, because they have the attitude and the competencies that can help them fit in different jobs. And anyway, by the time you reach management, what you are trained in is not that critical. It is those three that will determine how you operate in management. I hope I'm making sense. Yeah. Now, my time is up, so I'll have to find a way of stopping. But who wants to be the last to comment? Yeah, I'm above my time.
Maybe if I just said something else. Again, maybe what I'm maybe not hearing is that anytime you try to bring in the change, you get a tremendous amount of resistance. And the older an organization, the more of that resistance you will gather. And so it's that resistance that is a challenge to deal with.
Yeah, and of course it's a whole subject about change management, and there are 4 things we normally talk about if you are dealing with a change process. Number 1, don't start with a change where the urgency cannot be seen. In other words, you are changing just for the sake of it. It must be, the staff must know, like I did in that university, what is the urgency in a change. People accept the change if they understand not just why it is important, but why it is urgent. Because some people say, why can't you wait? Like I remember when we wanted to go what Cheryl called paperless society. In 1990s, we wanted to remove all, so that we don't work with paper. Other people say, why can't you wait until I retire? And people are retiring at 55, so they think, just wait another 5 years. So they must know why now and not tomorrow. Even people who resist, The moment they start understanding why it would happen and how and why it is urgent, you have only cleared step number 1. Step number 2, look for people who change easily. Identify people who are quick adapters. And of course, the assumption is that the managers know their people. And those are the people you will use to advise the change. Don't just announce the change as a CEO. Let, first of all, get the critical mass of those change agents and let them ask you questions, disagree with you, until it becomes not the CEO's idea, but our idea. The moment it becomes the idea, and they're the people with influence, they're the people who are change agents, you have taken step number 2. And it's a very, very important thing, because a lot of us think titles matter. Many people who influence WWF have no title. But every time the CEO announces something, there's somebody that night, there's a Kamuse who has no power. Well, what do you think about what the CEO said? And if that Muse says a certain thing, everybody he has influence on will follow that. And he has no title. And studies have shown those people exist. Because influence and titles are not relatives. Don't start assuming that because somebody is called a manager, he has necessarily got influence. So you need to identify who are those people whom once, because they are the same resistors, so you must work on them first. So once they accept, you have made step number 2. You are now ready to go. Once they have been doing the job of influencing the people, you have now step number 3, which is do not change too slowly and don't change too fast. You must allow the process a reasonable period to allow people who are not quick adapters to actually take the process. And those are, I can go, there are about 7, 8 steps, but I wanted to summarize them into 3. I hope I'm answering your question.
Yes.
Yeah. I was looking for a comment. Who would be the last to give the comment? Not a question. Okay.